Chapter 11, Combat Control School Communications. Combat Control School was structured in a way to keep us under constant stress. There was never enough sleep, and a massive amount of information was blasted out in a short time. It was divided into different sections. After our warm introduction to field training, the blocks of instruction were radio communications, demolitions, land navigation, assault zones, tactics, and a final mission phase known as a final FTX to finish out the course. The FTX brought together all the training combined to conduct mock missions. Besides the FTX, in each block of training we would spend a week in the classroom, going home at night to our barracks and training in the pit area, and then a week in the field applying our skills. It was 3 months of intense training to learn the core skills needed to be a combat controller. At the end, we'd be awarded the Scarlet Beret. The time spent in the classroom was not a break from being out in the field because we did our PT sessions in the pit. The large square area, bordered by wood beams, was filled with shredded tires to create a soft area for us to get smoked. It was towards the bottom of the hill the schoolhouse sat on. The workouts at CCS, unlike Air Traffic Control School, were mostly designed to exhaust us and completely tear us down. Like most events at Combat Control School, I hated the pit. The pace of the workouts was exhausting and impossible to keep up with. I had never experienced nausea during workouts like I did in the soft, chopped-up tires out in the open field in front of the schoolhouse. Although there were a small number of trainees at that point in the course, there were always 5 or 6 instructors circling us like sharks and watching our every move in the pit. There was no way to slack off or be unseen by them. We went from push-ups, abdominal exercises, and numerous moves that were designed to bring someone to complete physical exhaustion. We would move to the pull-up bars in between the exercises without any rest time, and hang on the bar, only getting a break if we fell off. We did even more pull-ups if someone fell off. We did the pit every morning, combined with long team runs carrying the heavy team rock, which was passed among ourselves, holding on to it as long as we could before passing it along. There was always something weighing us down at Combat Control School. I didn't find the communications classroom instructions hard to grasp. We went over the different radios we used throughout the course. We carried a big Vietnam-era radio that would be used for communicating with aircraft, and a small multi-band inter-team radio, the M-Bitter, and other radios we would use later on in our careers. Since there was not a lot involved in that portion, the practical tests were done Thursday and Friday of the same week. It was the only phase where we did not go out into the field after the classroom. Going to the chow hall for breakfast and lunch as a team during the classroom phases was standard, and we were on our own time for dinner. For dinner, we usually ate at the chow hall. Getting off Pope and through Fort Bragg and out to anywhere to eat in Fayetteville was a bigger pain in the ass than most of us were up for after a long day of training. The week-long portion of communications was not entirely uneventful. On Wednesday night that week, around 2 in the morning, we were surprised with room inspections. I woke to the sound of a siren on a bullhorn, a sound that I had grown too familiar with, and the loud screams of the instructors. I woke up many days at Combat Control School with a feeling of dread and questions of why I was there. It must have been the clarity of my mind, but as the minutes passed, my drive and inner determination usually kicked in. Sometimes it did not kick in until I was in the middle of a PT session, but it always seemed to come back at some point. When I realized what was going on that night, I quickly tried to kick my mind into gear, but it was extremely difficult to get myself out of the bed because I was awakened from a deep, restful REM sleep. And I didn't even remember I was in training for a few moments after I opened my eyes. The dread quickly returned as I recognized the instructors' voices. Being awoken at 2 in the morning, I had no time for clarity, so I jumped out of the bed from the ingrained response that I developed during Hell Week. We lined up in the hallway outside of our rooms as instructors went through each one, making sure our rooms were in perfect order. I'd learned in previous schools to have my bed already made and just sleep in a sleeping bag on top. Making the bed was the last thing I had to worry about in the morning and during those dreaded room inspections. Dressed in our dress blue uniforms, which should have been ready to go long before that moment, we waited as the instructors walked by us, checking for strings, wrinkles, or any other details we might have missed on our uniforms. We stood in silence while chaos unfolded all around us. "Why isn't your locker locked?" I heard from one of the rooms nearby. Then I heard a crash as a bed was flipped over, followed by a quiet, almost evil laugh. "What do we have under this fucking thing?" "Why does your uniform always look like a bag of ass, McDonald?" an instructor asked, barely visible in the dark hallway. Uniform inspections were another thing I never cared much for, and it showed. I never looked as perfect or sharp as a lot of the other guys. I always seemed to overlook something. As the instructors raged, I saw Airman First Class Morris looking around in a panic for his name tag that should have been pinned in his left chest area. It was gone, and he looked terrified. His uniform looked perfect, but without a name tag, he was toast. The instructors were all in the rooms flipping over beds and tossing garbage, clothes, and other belongings all over the place. They seemed to enjoy it. "What's all this trash under the bed? You been eating cookies? This is what brings in the bugs." I saw Morris desperately looking toward the corner at the end of the hallway. He was a short, unathletic-looking guy that was academically smart. His body resembled a late 40s guy that was barely in shape. Must have been his genetics, but could pass all the physical requirements. His reddish hair was curly even when he kept it super short. There was a blue name tag in the corner. As the instructors turned their attention in the other direction toward the noise in the rooms, Morris ran over and grabbed it. The look on his face was pure terror. He ran back and stood across from me outside of his room. He looked relieved, but there was a problem. The name started with an M, but it read Metz, not Morris. Morris sighed again, but would have to roll with it. Metz had watched from the previous class during Hell Week. I remember him coming back to Lackland, explaining the horrors of the course. Sergeant Sampson was making his way down the hallway, cracking jokes and looking over the uniforms. He was finding everything possible wrong. Railroad tracks, which was a double crease, wrinkles, and a dull shine on the shoes. As he looked him up and down, he grinned, and then he looked at me. Morris might have been a class favorite at Combat Control School because he was smart, but Sergeant Sampson had always taken it easy on me. He focused his attention on me first. "Are you awake, McDonald?" He gave me a friendly smile, and then he turned to Morris. Morris looked nervous. His cheeks became flushed. Sergeant Sampson carefully looked Morris up and down. "You look weird in your blues uniform, Morris," Sergeant Sampson said. Morris stood silent while at attention and blurted out a "Hoo-yah, Sergeant." Sergeant Sampson brushed some lint off Morris's shoulder. "Whatever, Morris. You look borderline retarded." There was a long, awkward pause while Sergeant Sampson looked over Morris, looking for anything to bust him on. Morris just looked straight ahead with the same look of terror on his face. His nervousness must have made him grin, or he was laughing about the way Sergeant Sampson was looking at him. "What are you laughing at, Morris? Drop on down." Finding nothing wrong with his uniform, Sergeant Sampson turned to walk toward the next cone, standing at attention, but he paused. Sergeant Sampson stopped, and he walked back over to Morris. "Recover, Morris," he said. Morris shot up to attention. Oh shit, I could tell what Sergeant Sampson was looking at on Morris's uniform from behind, but I knew Morris knew too. "Metz?" Sergeant Sampson said quietly, and then he shouted, "Who the fuck is Metz?" Morris flinched, his face became bright red. "Drop on down, Metz." Into the leaning rest he dropped. "Who the fuck are you?" As I watched Airman Morris knock out another 20 push-ups, I knew we were going to pay. The rooms were all trashed, and we all, as a team, got smoked in the dark hallway. As we knocked out push-ups, and then back to the leaning rest while the instructors preached, they informed us that our rooms were the worst they had ever seen, and Morris had the wrong name tag. Later I found this funny, but this was one of the worst smoke sessions I'd ever had. We stayed in the leaning rest between sets of flutter kicks and push-ups for over an hour. When the inspections were over, the day was about to begin in the pit. Our rooms were trashed. We were assigned to carry a huge telephone pole to breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the word teamwork carved in it. Every team got it at some point, and the room inspections were our reason. By our estimation, we'd probably done over 1,000 push-ups, flutter kicks, sit-ups, and all kinds of different exercises before our day even began out in the pit. After communications, we moved on to the dangerous course of demolitions. And then the most arduous part of the course for me that nearly broke me physically, land navigation.